Well, welcome to our podcast number 38. Today, it's just me, Skeleton Crew, Charlie Mattingly on Pilot Money Guys, with my great friend Ron Broyles, the man, the myth, and the legend, urban mountain climber, stuntman. The list goes on, which I will get to in a minute. But Ron, like I was telling you before, we usually have our crew on here of. We've got all our silly call signs, Ron, as well that we do, and you'll have to listen to another episode to hear that. Okay, but today, I just wanted to have an interview with you. You and I have been good friends for a couple of years now. I've learned a ton about you, and I'm excited for everybody to hear about your experience, your background, and what we're going to talk about today. So let me just kind of frame for folks what we're going to talk about. You know, we're going to talk about high performance, high energy, high quality of life, even as you age. And that's kind of been your passion, Ron. I mean, you're approaching 69 here in a couple months, if I remember correctly.
4 weeks, actually.
4 weeks. There we go.
Almost to the day.
Yeah. Very nice. And you have more energy. You're in better shape and more creativity, great thinking, a great quality of life, and your perspective and your mindset is awesome. And I think that comes from your experiences that you've had throughout your life.
Well, thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, by the way.
Yeah.
I had a great upbringing. I never had a dad, but my mother and my grandmother instilled in me some values that I've carried through my entire life, not always perfectly, but there's, success leaves clues. Mm-hmm. And there's certain things that if you carry them with you, no matter what situation you are in life, things are probably going to turn out pretty well for you.
That's awesome. That's awesome because we speak to airline pilots, cargo pilots, corporate pilots is our main audience, and their families. And quality of life is a phrase we use all the time in the world of flying, because you could have a schedule that's pretty miserable and make tons of money, but your quality of life is miserable. So we want to try to find that balance. But before we get into that, Ron, I'm going to read a little bit of your bio, which is pretty fun. And then we'll maybe have you tell a couple stories, maybe one about jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge or jumping off the bridge in San Diego out of a car. Anyway, so Ron is an actor, stunt performer with over 20 years of experience in the entertainment business. He has written and produced television commercials and as a member of the SAG-AFTRA. Did I get that right?
Yes.
SAG-AFTRA. Okay, cool. Credited stunt coordinator and second unit director for film and TV. You graduated from University of Tennessee in 1980, was mentored in the stunt trade by Troy Melton, one of the 5 founding members of the Stuntman's Association. And as a graduate of Bob Eubanks' Hollywood Stunt School, Ron has worked under the cast and crew of Dukes of Hazzard, one of my favorite shows growing up, learning everything from motion picture fighting and car rolls to high falls and horse work. His live performances for international productions include exterior ascents of some of America's tallest buildings, including the Peachtree Plaza Hotel in Atlanta, the Renaissance Center in Detroit, the First Interstate Bank in Los Angeles, California, the Transamerica Pyramid in San Francisco, and Houston, Texas Commerce Tower, which is over 1,000 feet tall and took an incredible 18 hours to scale. That's incredible, 18 hours. Let's see, and it goes on, skydiving, base jumping. You were trained by the guy who invented the sport, Carl, how do I say his last name?
Beanish,
Carl Beanish, okay. This is one of my favorites. You can see this on YouTube. Jump from a sunroof of a moving limousine doing 55 miles an hour over San Diego's Coronado Bridge. That was fun to watch for me. Jump from a bunch of different aircraft, balloon, helicopters, trained at Edwards Air Force Base in the altitude chamber. And one of those trainings looks like Colonel Joe Kittinger of the U.S. Air Force. He held the skydiving altitude record of 102,800 feet for over 50 years.
Yes.
That's incredible. All right, let's see. What else, man? You got all kinds of stuff on here. Rock climbing, base jumping, motorcycle riding, precision driving, scuba diving, snowboarder skiing, mountain climber. You and I went climbing together in an indoor studio. I was kind of scared to go outdoors, but anyway. But for your 50th birthday, you rode a bicycle across the country, 3,000 miles from Los Angeles to Hampton, Virginia in 31 days. I believe I saw an article on that on the LA Times. Is that right?
Yes.
So, yeah. And then for your 60th birthday, you rode from Gatlinburg, Tennessee to Key West, 1,200 miles in support of the Wounded Warrior Project. And most importantly, now you reside in beautiful Maryville, Tennessee, my neighbor down the road, and we get to hang out and work out together occasionally and learn together. So it's been fun, Ron. But as I read all that, anything stick out in your mind as far as highlights, lowlights, anything?
Well, when I climbed the Texas Commerce Tower in Houston, it did take 18 hours.
Yeah.
I got on the building. I got attachment about 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was very foggy and nobody could see anything. And I got up beyond where the fire trucks usually have the hook and ladder. They can stop you up to about 70 feet, but after that, you're free to clear.
Yeah.
And it became a wonderful day. It was a little warm though, but it did take 18 hours to get to the top. I got off at midnight. And it was weird because all the way up, they'd been talking to me because I had a telephone set up and we were talking to Australia and LA and, just getting a lot of press.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to the top, I went over and it was really cool looking because there was a one-story machinery building on top. And on top of that was a helicopter sitting there. And just the blades would just go, boop, 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 boop. And there was about 50 policemen, Houston policemen standing there at parade rest, and they're all backlit. It was like a movie set. It was very cool.
Wow.
But they were really nice. And, we just had a great time down there. And a lot of the oil men, I had to go back for court. And by the way, I was acquitted of trespassing because they told me to get off over halfway up. And so the only way I could get off the fastest was to continue to climb. So,
nice.
But just really took over. Houston was a great town at that time because when we got off the building, there was about 30,000 people in downtown Houston, and that never happened. Wow. There was like floodlights going on and good old boys in their trucks. It was really a fun time.
So they're all cheering for you, and kind of even the police. It sounds like they're kind of just waiting for you. And
yeah, and strangely enough, there were a lot of New York cops who had moved down there.
Huh.
And they had seen George Willard climb the World Trade Center a few years before. They'd actually been up there for that. And they go, man, you're just like George, but he didn't take that long. What happened? I don't know. It turned out fine. I wasn't acquitted of trespassing and got a little bit of press. And that's, hey, when you're in Hollywood, that's everything, man.
I'm sure there were personal reasons that you were doing that, like, hey, let's attack some fear and whatever. But there's also a business behind that, right? I mean, that's why you were doing it.
Well, as my buddy says, he said, Ron, you need to extricate yourself from the masses because you have to understand in LA every day, there's people driving out and getting off the plane and getting off the train and, hitchhiking out to be in the movie business.
Yeah.
And when you're confronted with those numbers of people, you really have to do something to kind of stand out.
Wow.
And this was our way. And I say our because I had a crew with me on all these things. And that's kind of our way of separating ourselves. As Ed Mylett says, you got to elevate and separate. And that's the way I did it.
That's awesome. Is this the one that you were doing in a white tuxedo with white dress shoes?
Yes. Very
nice. All right. I'll have the link to that in the show notes. Yeah. That's pretty cool. And I think the story is awesome about when you jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, and that's on YouTube as well. I'll link that, but your chute opened the wrong way. Is that right?
It did. And actually, it was a segment of Shockwave on the History Channel. And they flew me out there and wined me and dined me and did a great interview and actually did a very good CG, computer generated reproduction of just what happened during that jump. And it's in that video you were talking about. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was a little bit scary because the first one I did came off without a hitch. Nothing happened at all. And then I went back to the drop zone at Paris Valley. And I was talking to the guys and they go, we want to do it too, man. So I picked a couple of guys that I thought would be really cool about it. We went back and we got to the middle. There's two towers. There's one over on the Sausalito side, and there's one out in the middle of the bay. And we'd already done the one that was attached to the land. It touches it there. And we wanted to get out and do the one. And we actually, a friend of mine, and the recon and stuff of the first one, we got access to it from down below and climbed up, and we finally found an elevator and a door on the street level. And he took the lock apart, took micrometer readings on the pins and made a key for it. So all we had to do now was walk up on the street and open the door and go in, and then take our stuff to the top. It was very cool. Yeah. But the second one it was less than optimum performance. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. So from what I remember, you jump, your chute opens and it turns you around and pushes you back into the bridge. Is that right?
Yeah, it was an old T10
Yeah.
because we knew that they were probably going to get lost in the water. We didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money on a nice rig. So we got an old reserve T10 and we packed it. And the guy who packed it was an FAA certified rigger, but we didn't know it at the time, but he had a little bit of a drug problem. And he packed it in reverse, and both of our chutes, RB and I both opened in reverse.
All right.
Instead of flying away from the bridge, as you normally would do, with the panels in the T10 are out,
Yeah.
and it kind of gives you some forward thrust. We ended up flying directly back into the bridge, getting hung up on the catwalk. Yeah.
So it sounds like you saved some money on the parachute. That's good. It's always good to spend a little less on the parachute, a little less on the skill set for the parachute
exactly.
pack. That sounds good.
Well, we just thought that since we were going to do it, we might as well. We knew we were going to lose the rig. We knew that.
Yeah.
Once you drop down into the moat,
Yeah.
at the bottom, you have to take your gear off because you can't really reach the ladder, with your gear on.
Right.
It's like a porpoise. You swim underwater and you jump up and try to grab this ladder. And finally got a hold of it. And about the time I got to the top of it, there was this red spinning light, which was the Coast Guard waiting to take me in.
Yeah. So the coolest thing I thought about that was you get slammed back into the bridge, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got a broken ankle, right?
Two, actually.
Two broken ankles.
Right.
And you have to push away, cut away, and open your reserve, right?
Yes. Yeah, that adrenaline though that's some good stuff. You can pretty much go work through anything if you're really high on adrenaline.
Oh man.
But yeah, it was, and we only had a 17-foot cargo chute as the reserve because we're going into the water, and if you hit it 30 miles an hour, it's not a big deal. But what I didn't realize at the time is that there's a seawall around the base of the tower to keep ships from hitting running into the base of the tower, and it's about 10 feet thick. So there's a flat platform all the way around, and I just missed hitting that with that 17-foot cargo chute, which I was coming down from 250 feet. I was probably doing 35, 40 miles an hour still.
Yeah.
And landed in the little moat there that separates the ocean from the base of the tower, and the water in there never exchanges. And dead birds and scum that's been in there for years, probably. And then I immediately took my rig off, and it sank to the bottom. It's probably there to this day. It's probably on the bottom somewhere.
Well, it's amazing that you're still with us today. So like we always joke with you and say you're around for a reason. So you've got a purpose for sure.
I think so. I think it's taken a long time to beat some of this, real important things into my head, but I believe I'm finally coming around at 69.
Awesome. Well, I mean, we could go on with stories, and like I said, I'll link some of the stuff. I think it was fun to watch you jump out of that car, the limo, over the Coronado Bridge. But the funniest part about that was not just as the poles were going by at 55 miles an hour and you trying to fit between them as you jumped, but the funniest part you said was the limo driver didn't know you were going to jump out. Is that right?
He had no idea. So you couldn't do any of this today. There'd be people on cell phones, and you'd have the police on you in about 2 minutes. But there were no cell phones back then, and he thought we were just going to go over to the hotel across on Coronado Island and have a dinner or something. And he found himself right in the middle of this big caper that he had no idea about.
So it seems like he played along, because I remember, I think it was a video where you told me that, hey, you were telling him, or somebody was telling him to get over. You got to get over in that emergency lane, get close to that.
It's on the video.
Okay.
We keep trying to get him over closer and closer, because where he started out, I was half a lane away from the edge, and I was just hoping I could jump far enough to make it over the edge. He could get over closer. Come on, get close. And he finally did, and it all turned out well.
Holy cow. In hindsight, it was a good thing to do in hindsight, huh?
Well, it all was. And it's the kind of thing you look back on and you realize that even though some of this stuff seems crazy, it still, builds you as a person. Yeah. It puts you in situations that later on down the road, you may be in something similar to that, and you know what to do because you've been there.
Absolutely. And I remember too, it was in one of the videos they were talking about, hey, this is not just some, stuntman doing stunts. These were very, very precisely planned. I'll say well thought out. I mean, you put a lot of work into this stuff in the prep and the planning.
We had about 30 people involved in the Golden Gate Bridge jump. We had 5 boats in the water. We had a lot of ex-military people with inflatables who had twin Chrysler 500s on. They could do about 60 miles an hour in an inflatable boat just to get you away in case anything happened. But we reconned the thing. We spent 3 months trying to find the top of the Golden Gate Bridge. And by that, I mean, it was built in the 30s and there's no welding. It's all riveted together. So you have these tubes that are basically all riveted together, and they're not more than about 3 feet square. So you're climbing 750 feet to the top to see if you climbed a tube that might have an exit to the top of the bridge. If it doesn't happen, you got to climb back down and start all over again. So we had these maps of the tubes that we'd been up to. And then we're up there. This is about the 3rd weekend we're up there. And my buddy goes, "Hey, Ron, there's a cable right over there across the way." You could see across several of the tubes to a cable. It was an elevator. Well, that's when he got down in the elevator, and we kind of figured, if we can have access to the elevator, we don't have to worry about this climbing stuff anymore. And that's exactly what happened.
The stories are amazing, what you've done, and it's just incredible because to me, I love the idea of taking those things that you faced, those situations that you faced, and then kind of going, well, how can we learn from that? And how can we become, high performers? How can we have a better quality of life in our day-to-day living? My wife mentioned this the other day about you, Ron. She was like, Ron's, just like one of us. In other words, I mean, you live a normal life, normal day-to-day stuff, but you're very intent and very focused on learning how to get better all the time, learning how to have a better quality of life. And sometimes that starts on the inside, and you work out religiously, and nutrition's important in your life. We'll talk about those in a minute. But you and I talked too before this about how it's a mindset, I should say, a state of mindset on accomplishing these things for our pilots out there, their day-to-day routine. Sometimes it gets a little mundane. Sometimes we get tired. Sometimes we get in these ruts, if you will. But that's what we're talking about today. How do we have a great, fulfilling life? And it kind of starts in our heads, right?
Yeah. There's almost this need for a person to feel like they deserve to have a good life.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people who don't think they are. You hear it in the gym all the time. Well, back when I was young, and you're talking about kids 30, 40 years old. They're talking about, back when I was young, I could do this, and I don't think I can do that. And, that can't word is just horrible.
Yeah.
And another one is the O word, old. Throw those both away, and insert things with positivity and certain things. And it has to be very intentional. You almost, I wouldn't say you have to take a weekend retreat and go to the woods somewhere, but that wouldn't hurt at all. To go back and find out, to reset and find out who you are and literally become grounded again.
Yeah.
I mean, we are inhabitants of a planet that we used to be very, very connected to, and we're almost completely unconnected at this point. It's all electronics. It's all stimulus. It's all stuff that's synthetic that's been put in our life that doesn't really need to be there.
Absolutely.
I mean, I understand we've opened the genie, the bottle is open now and the genie's out, but we don't necessarily have to worship that genie. We can say, hey, you go on, you're going to have to affect someone else here. I don't have interest in watching 42,000 cat videos, or, I mean, it's stuff like that. They just waste your time, but you got to be very intentional about what you let you go into your head. Mm-hmm. And I don't know exactly who said it. I think it was Jim Rome who said, you have to guard the door of your mind. And that's exactly what you have to do, because if you don't, you've got so many people knocking on the door and beating on the door and trying to kick it in that anything and everything can get in there. And then you got a real mess going on.
Yeah. And I love what you said about, and we're going to transition now into like, okay, so what do we do, as pilots and the families to minimize, some of the stress that's going on right now? And I love that word you use, intentionality. We'll get back to that in a second. And what goes into our minds and hearts is super important too. But, Ron, right now is a real stressful time in the airlines, probably for our corporate and cargo pilots as well. Most of the major airlines right now are doing contract negotiations. It's been tough since COVID. They've been undermanned, understaffed. And I'll tell you what, man, I know what it's like when you pull up to a gate and you're ready to turn that airplane, get around and get out of there on time, get your passengers where they need to go, but there's nobody there to service. Things are delayed, things are late, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it just is kind of frustrating. And I think that wears on people after a while. A lot of things just kind of wear on you, and
Yes.
the negotiations are tough. And for me, it was stressful. Sometimes it doesn't bother people. Some people really get into it, but I think, like you just said, all those things come in and I guess the best way to say it, Ron, is they kind of try to steal your joy if you're not intentional about preserving that. So we'll talk today a little bit, but I think that's the premise, of our discussion today, is that, hey, we're running a race, or a game. I hate to call life a game because it's more like an infinite game, but what is your purpose, and if you're not intentional about that race that we're running, if you're not preparing for it, or the fight that we're fighting, whatever analogy we want to use, because there is a fight going on. Like you said, there's a fight for our attention. There's a fight for our energy. There's a fight for our time and money. And if we don't fight back, we will not have time to exercise. We will not have time to eat right. The stuff that goes in our mind will make us angry and depressed. So those are things that we'll talk about here in just a minute on how to fight against that.
I think one of the great things that pilots have going for them, all the pilots I've known, very intelligent, very disciplined, and capable of juggling a lot of information at one time. And that's great up to a point, but when it becomes overwhelming, and then you add in all these things with family and friends and work pressures and stuff that may not bother certain people, but others, it just gets under their skin. And it all goes back to that old saying, worry about the things that you can control. If you can't control them, and this is the tough part, if you can't control them, try to dismiss them some way. And if you're a pilot and that's your passion, you love flying, you love to be in the air, you love the whole ambiance, if you will, of going through the skies, that's great. If you're doing it and it's okay, but it's working on you, you have to find some joy in something. It could be your family, it could be a hobby, it could be reading, whatever is your diversion from all those pressures. You have to kind of focus in on that too, not to ignore your responsibilities, but you've got to have some joy in there somewhere. And I am a person of faith, and I lean on that quite a bit. And I know that success leaves clues. And if you look at most successful people, they will tell you that there's a certain spiritual element to what they do that has helped them.
Yep.
And that's worth pursuing too. Everything is worth looking into to help you be a better person, a more influential person. If you want to have reach and influence over your family and friends, that's got to be intentional too. You can't just float through life and go, well, I know this, and I don't care if those people know it. Maybe they need to know it. Maybe you know something that could help them. And that gets back to service. And I think we're on the planet to serve people. I think that's how we get the I out of us and start looking out and branching out to how we can help other people. And that helps us feel better. That helps our mental health tremendously. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing better for me than knowing I've helped someone through something. Even when I was rock climbing, and I'd have friends go out, and there became this saying, never follow Ron Broyles, never follow him. Because I get guys up there and they'd freeze up, and then you have to like belay them and get them down and stuff. And then you sit down with them at the bottom and you go over what happened. Well, I thought I was going to fall. I said, well, you're on a rope here that can hold a truck. Why would you think that you're going to be the one that breaks the rope? Well, it's just in my head. Well, let's see if we can put it out of your head. And then you take them back, and maybe you go to the climbing gym, and maybe you keep working with them. And finally, when they get to that point where you can look up that 1,000-foot cliff, you know how to get up there. You get to the top and you stand up and you look at the world and you realize, you know what? I can do this. I can do this. I guarantee I can do a lot of other things too. And that's the breakthrough that you have to have.
I love that, this idea that you and I started with, like, because you're passionate about aging and being able to enjoy your life and it getting better as you get older. And you're the most energetic, 69-year-old person that I've ever seen. And that is because of all the things you're talking about right now and all the things that you've experienced. And that starts, I think, in our minds. So you and I started talking about nutrition and exercising, but really that battle starts exactly where you just said. And so that's what I love about it is just the holistic attitude of it all, because it has to be that way. It cannot be just exercise and or nutrition in isolation.
And it's something that you control completely. You're in total control, and there's so much information on the internet now. If you take that step, you say, okay, I want to be intentional about my health, my fitness, my wellness, my associations, whether they be family or friends. I want to be intentional in making those better. There's so much information out there on how to do that. And maybe you'll have to spend some time that you might have been looking at cat videos, but stop the cat videos and get out there and do something that's meaningful. And like with a TikTok, God forbid. But I think once you start on that journey and you're serious about it, and you take these little steps and things start to open up a little bit, I think it's just one joyful day after another. Now, don't get me wrong, there's going to be some bad things happen, but you'll be able to deal with those better, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So Ron, let's go into a section here, man. I'm excited because we've kind of laid the groundwork, and I kind of want our audience and our pilots and the families listening just to think like, hey, there is, again, a race to be run, and we want to run that well, and we want to end this race, i.e. our lives, in such a way that we get the old thumbs up from the man upstairs and says, hey, well done, or our legacy is something that people can be proud of, our kids or grandkids, because we can affect generations. And so, and not only that, just like when in our planning business, Ron, we not only want to prepare you for retirement, that point way in the future, but we think you can have a better quality of life now too, with some planning and intentionality. And I love your mountain climbing or rock climbing example, because maybe that's what it means for some people. Hey, get outside, pick up a new hobby, get connected to nature, or to rock climbing or exercise or activity, because sometimes we lose that, like you said.
Well, believe it or not, I think human beings are built for change. They are built to take on all kinds of different activities, all kinds of different challenges. We may not be able to be a Tiger Woods or a Tom Brady, but we can extend ourselves in another direction in some fashion pretty well. And once again, once you jump into that world of trying to be better at something a little bit every day, maybe 1%, maybe that's all it takes. And it all begins with the intention that you need to do it. If you're living a life that you enjoy enough to want to continue to live, so that you can see your grandchildren graduate from high school or college and get married, then you have to start. And I don't care if you're 25 or 55, you have to start doing it now, because all this stuff builds up. And at some point, it'll just become a wave that'll carry you on, and you won't even have to think that much about it. I know if you're sitting around now going, my God, I just don't feel like it. It's weird about working out. If you start working out on a regular basis, those days where you don't feel like working out get fewer and fewer and fewer. And pretty soon the alarm goes off, you get up, you put your stuff on, and you're in the gym before you know it. And that's a beautiful thing.
That's awesome. I think what you just said is perfect. The number one thing we talked about there was, hey, all it takes is 1 to 2 choices a day. It may be 1% better, or just tweak something a little bit. I love what you said there about change. I remember I came from the world of F-16s in the Air Force. We flew different models, different software packages. You would go out to your airplane and you didn't know, you might know before you stepped out there, hey, I've got a different software in my airplane today, different whatever. And you just got used to that. In the airline world, it is the same airplane most of the time, and we get used to that sameness. And I think sometimes that can be a trap, but 1 to 2 differences a day or choices a day can make a huge difference.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, while you're flying, learn to juggle or something. I mean,
that's right.
Switch it up a little bit. No, I just think that and I hate to broad brush it, but most people don't have a clue about what they're really capable of.
Yeah.
They've just never pushed themselves enough. And I think it's the more and more convenience, and let's face it, that's what this world is about. My buddy put it this way. He said, the downfall of Western civilization was mechanical air conditioning. Everybody stays inside. And I think he's got something to do there.
There's some truth there for sure.
But we need to get uncomfortable quite a bit. We need to
Love it.
we need to get hot and sweaty sometimes, just to feel what it used to be like for people that got out every day. And
Yeah.
if you didn't go out and hunt your food or
Yeah.
grow your food, you didn't eat. Just to have that connection instead of going into 7-Eleven or Kroger or something and buying a whole bunch of stuff, 90% of which is not really that good for you.
Yeah.
And then coming out and, well, I'm set. I can go home and watch this show and eat these cookies and drink a half gallon of milk. And this is what I've been living for. No, it's not. That's not what you've been living for at all. There's a higher calling. There's a better calling. There's a better path. And all we have to do is say, you know what? I want to break out and try this because I've always wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And those bucket list things, don't wait till you retire. Most people retire and they're too tired. There's a reason they allow us to work till we're 65. They have taken most of the energy out of our bodies. And we've got a little bit left that hopefully we can do something that's productive with. But you know what? In most cases, that's when the downhill slant starts.
Yeah.
That's when your glide path goes from 3 to 1 to 20 to 1 or something. It's a nosedive.
Absolutely.
And you have to start early on shielding yourself from those things, mostly environmental, which affect your physical being. And that's what we eat, what we think, and what we do.
Absolutely. The second one on the list here that we talked about is healthy relationships, perhaps accountability partnerships. And Ron, you and I have talked before, you become the 5 people you hang around with most.
Your 5 closest friends, you're the average of those people, generally speaking, not always. In my case, I'm proud that my grandmother and my mother never once told me you can't do anything. And if I walked in and said, Mom, I'm going to ride my motorcycle across the country, she said, well, be careful. And she said, well, I'm going to the store, which was a block away, to buy a loaf of bread or ride my motorcycle across the country. It's the same thing. Be careful. And we do this to our children. We do it to our grandchildren. You can't do this because. No, people, we need to fail. You don't learn anything from success, Charlie. You learn everything you need to know about how to move forward and grow through failure. I mean, if you're a boxer and you lose 2 or 3 times, well, let me look at some film. Let me figure out where I'm holding my hands wrong. Let me see if I can get quicker, and let me go back in and try it again. But if you get beat down and give up, it's over.
Absolutely. One of our famous people to quote, Mike Tyson, says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right?
Exactly.
So, I think this relationship and accountability thing is so important. Ron, since I left the airlines back in 2020, as a part of the volunteer separation plan, to me, the biggest difference is I've been able to develop more relationships.
Yes.
When you're flying around the country, your schedules is different all the time. It's really hard to get connected. And I think as people, we're naturally wired for relationships. And when we don't have those, I think it really is a void in our life.
And what you have to do as a professional, particularly, is look at everyone as though you can learn something from them. I don't care if, look, if I'm a fellow at the Mayo Clinic and you're a shaman from Africa and you think you can cure cancer by waving chicken feet over somebody's abdomen, I guarantee you can still learn something from that person.
Yep,
and if
that's
you
right.
Graduated from Harvard and I didn't get out of high school, we may have some communication problems, but I guarantee you we could learn something from that relationship.
And plus it's fun. It's just like, it's much more fun to live life with great relationships. And I think that's difficult for pilots because of schedule. I'm going to just go out on a limb and say, I think it's more difficult for men. That's just because I am one, and maybe I'm wrong on that one, but I think that's super important to be intentional about.
Well, we've got so many walls that we put up. We have so many masks that we put up. And our culture has taught us that you've got to be tough and you've got to be have a certain look and wear certain clothes and drive certain. It's ridiculous.
Yep.
The whole thing's ridiculous.
It is. Yeah. We got to get past that, which leads us to number 3, which I think is the most overlooked factor in our overall health. It especially, again, as professionals sometimes traveling around, is our emotional health. We probably don't give that the attention that it deserves. And I put in my notes, don't try to John Wayne through some of the situations in our lives that we go through, such as, the tragedies in our lives, death, divorce, hard times with money, finances, marriage, whatever it may be. we just don't do that well, it seems like. And it seems like maybe because it's overlooked. I don't know, Ron. What do you think?
We try to cover it up.
Yeah.
We don't let the real emotion come through because we're kicking against it too much. And we lose the joy that comes from working through that the way human beings should. And that's feel the emotion, express the, I mean, when's the last time you cried, Charlie? I've cried just a couple of days ago. And it was watching Sweet Home Alabama with Reese Witherspoon. I won't go there, but anyway,
Nice.
I'm just saying there's things that we should be okay with.
That's right.
You know, we should allow our feelings to be able to come out. And I'm not saying you have to go around and hug everybody and all this stuff. Although I will tell you one thing I started doing. I started just walking up to people and introducing myself. I do it at the gym all the time.
Yeah.
Walking up, introducing myself, give them a compliment. Hey, you're working out really hard. I mean, how long have you been doing? And then get a relationship started with them. And something that these days I think is very important. Go up and introduce yourself to someone who doesn't look like you. We have this standoffish feeling between people who don't look like each other. Yeah. And and we're all human beings.
Absolutely.
And it's easy to overcome that. It really is. All you have to do is put your hand out.
I know. I love that, Ron. And you're like the mayor of our gym here in Maryville, Tennessee. That's for sure. Hey, listen, you gave me this awesome book, The Power of One More by Ed Milet. And I love it. He touches on a ton of these things that we're talking about today, but he dedicates an entire chapter to our emotions. And he talks about being intentional, like this is the emotion I want to feel, happy, joy, at peace, and then go about it. Now we can get into that, on a whole nother topic. But what I love in his book, and I'm going to steal it from his book, he says, studies have even shown that unhealthy anger in its repressed state has been linked to cancer. And I know that, man, over your lifetime, all of us are going to go through stuff that make us angry. And if we don't deal with it, we're in trouble. He goes on to say, unaccompanied by positive emotions, negative emotions can create an endless stream of ruminations. This repeated negative thinking increases the brain's stress levels, flooding our bodies with the stress hormone cortisol that can lead to depression, overeating, drug and alcohol abuse, high blood pressure, and cardiovascular disease. I mean, get this book. It's a great one. And I was really, that's something I haven't put much thought into, Ron, like my emotional health and my intentionality. What do I do about it? You know what I mean? So I think that's huge.
It is huge. It is huge. Most people, like I said, they want to stuff things away. They think it makes you look tougher, or it makes you, or you just, in many cases, you think, well, why do they care about what I'm feeling? I don't need to express it because they're in their own world doing their own thing. Well, we're all human beings. And, if you see someone that's down and everything, and your automatic response almost is, what's wrong, man? How can I help you? What can I do? Can I help you so much? So we just need to quit worrying about what everyone thinks. I always tell the girls, I got two girls, the first step on the road to mediocrity is caring what other people think. And I think that's really true. You stop worrying about what people think and start worrying about, am I sharing myself, my real self with the world? I think a lot of things will open up. You'll see a lot of opportunities. You'll find situations where you never thought things were going to turn out well, but they did because of new relationships you've made, because you're unafraid to be you.
It's so amazing, Ron. We've talked about several points up till now, and we haven't talked at all about exercise and nutrition. I mean,
not at all.
And it's amazing because, again, we're talking about aging in a healthy, energetic way so you can be with your family, your grandkids.
Yes.
Now, obviously, health, exercise and nutrition is super important, but it's amazing how many topics there are up till that point, which brings us to, one of the things that you're most passionate about right now is nutrition and thinking about that. What are your thoughts as far as how the heck do we, especially our traveling pilots? I mean, it's really challenging. You got to bring some food sometimes. Sometimes you just have to eat out. And I ate a lot of fast food on the way to and from airports. I know that.
There's two books. I think it's called Sugar, Salt, Fat by Michael Moss. And there's another one, Sickening. I think that's by John Abramson. And those two books, when you read them, you will understand that there is a directed assault on our nutrition from processed food companies. and there's a whole industry called the pharmaceutical industry who will deal with the effects of the processed food companies when nobody wants to cure anything, because that's not really good for business, but they will certainly treat you until you die. And the thing about Michael Moss's book about salt, sugar, fat, in 1999, there was a big meeting with all the processed food companies, General Mills, Kraft, and the whole phalanx of Pillsbury in Minnesota. And their own scientists were saying, guys, we've started something here since we've been putting high fructose corn syrup in almost everything because it's very expensive. We're beginning to see more and more and more obesity, particularly in children. This is 1999. Mm. We think maybe we ought to tweak things a little bit and try to back off some of this. In the terminology of the industry, it's called mouthfeel. You put something in your mouth and you just think, my God, that's incredible. And then you wonder why it tastes so good. Well, they put people in MRI machines, they feed them a product, they see where the pleasure centers just start blooming in your head, and then they take that product and tweak it even more so they'll get more response. And when those scientists told this to everybody there was kind of a pecking order. I think at the time, General Mills guy was kind of the head honcho. And he stood up and basically said, that's all very mildly interesting, but we've got shareholders to be responsible too. Sorry, it didn't change anything. And it's led from that in 1999 now to 25% of between 9-year-olds and 14-year-olds having pre-diabetes. And almost everyone, if you do a 360-degree turn in Walmart or Kroger, almost everyone is at least 25, 30 pounds overweight. Most people who've gotten to that point, if they don't change, will be obese or morbidly obese before they die. And there's something that I like to say, you see fat people and you see old people, but guess what? You don't see a lot of old fat people.
Reminds me of the old saying, you see, there's bold pilots and old pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots.
Correct.
This is one of those, Ron, where I talked earlier about, hey, we're in a battle, a race, a game, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to sound too much of a conspiracy type person, but there is some of that going on where they're marketing to us their food products, and we need to be on guard. We need to be trained to know and understand the things that you just said. Hey, they're not out for our best interest.
In processed food, there's almost no nutrition in them.
Yeah.
It's stuff that's been chemically formulated in a lot of cases to taste like real food, but it has no real food content in it.
Yeah. Well, that's going to take, the nutrition piece there. We could talk a lot on that one alone, but it takes a lot of intentionality, some study. There's no way we can be smart about it without getting educated. I just don't think there's no way around that.
No, and you have to understand that if you don't get on top of that and take a serious look at the ingredients of almost everything you buy, because we know added sugars in almost everything. Mm-hmm. Added sugar is led to insulin resistance and metabolic disease, atherosclerosis. We know, and it's going to be 20 years before it kind of catches up the way smoking did. Mm. There'll come a time when we'll go, you know what? We shouldn't have put any of that stuff in there because it's, and the hard part then is to prove, okay, how can you prove that over 30 years ago, this has led to your death? Well, I don't know how that's going to shake out, but we certainly know that a lot of these additives, and they're called generally regarded as safe, GRAS. Mm-hmm. There was 200 of them at one time. Now there's about 6,000. They don't even have to tell us they're in there because they're generally regarded as safe.
Wow.
And all they do mainly is keep things on the shelf longer. Yeah. Adds to mouthfeel, adds to the texture that we like the most. And they've done so much research on this. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. I mean, they figured this out. All the algorithms are in place where they know exactly what we want and how much of it. You can't get it too sweet or people don't like it. And you can't get it too little sweet or they won't like it either. That way, so it's amazing some of these things.
It's amazing the efforts that go on in our world to, again, to get our attention, to get our money, to get our time. And it's amazing what money.
And you've got to stop that from happening and take charge of your health and your wellness, because nobody gives a rat's butt.
Yep, you're right. You nailed it. We could talk about that one forever, and clearly you're passionate about that one. This is what I'm passionate about, and I know you are too. Number 5 is, I think, and I know you think, to have a healthy life and age and have a great quality of life, you have to have an attitude of gratitude. What do you do for that one, Ron?
I get up every morning. I've got a notification set on my phone. Every hour, it just pops up and goes gratitude. And I try to think of one or two things every hour that I'm grateful for. I mean, it could be a small thing. It could be, I didn't get my white shoes dirty today. You know, something as mundane as that. But then you start thinking about you start thinking of that little piece of gratitude. And then you look at your family and your friends, and you see something your son or daughter has done. And you're going, you know what? They did listen to me. I'm so grateful that they took that in. I thought it was going in one ear and out the other, but they really heard me.
Yeah.
Your friends, you know, if you go to the gym, and one of them comes up, the greatest compliment I have ever had in my life. This was back when I lived in LA. I had a friend who I just met. It's funny because his brother was second in command of the Crips. I'm not kidding you. But Darren went a different way. Darren was a systems analyst for, I think, CNC at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we started hanging out because our girls saw each other up the street, and we started hanging out. And then he's the one that went on my bicycle trip with me. He made it 1,000 miles. He started getting some numbness in his hands, and that's his, you know, that's the way he earned his living. So, but we were at a party one time, and I heard Darren. He didn't know I was listening to him. He said, when you're around Ron, you want to be a better person. That's the greatest compliment I've ever had.
That's true, Ron. I can attest.
When you're not even trying, you're just trying to do the best you can do for you. That can be reflected, and people like something about that. Hey, that's great.
And it's like you talked about before. We can have an influence. You know, why not have a positive influence? And the more grateful we are, the more things that we do that you and I've been talking about, the more intentionality we have, the more influence we'll have to to more people. Our sphere of influence grows, and it's positive. And I think it's our obligation, Ron, as we get as we age and we grow, is to positively influence, like you said, and even serve those around us.
Well, it's interesting how that just being grateful turns into a situation where people trust you more. Because I know guys who, you know, they'll be at the gym and they like to chip away at you a little bit, you know, oh, you didn't quite do this right. But if you find a person who's grateful and he's always complimenting you and trying to lift you up and trying to make you feel better, you trust that person more.
Oh, wow, that's a great point.
You trust them more.
Yeah.
And once you get that trust bond going, then, you know, outside of the gym, it could lead to other things, and who knows how far it can go.
That's right. I love it. I love it. Number 6. One of my favorites is, I think, giving, giving of yourself, giving of your money, perhaps, things that you think are valuable to. I think it changes our perspective. I think it creates an attitude of abundance. And so I think that is one of those things, Ron, tell me what you think, but it has to lead to a healthier life, a happier life, I believe anyway. What do you think on that one?
If you believe you have been blessed by certain gifts, and whether they're the ability to speak or they're financial, if you're willing to give some portion of that back, I mean, biblically it's 10%, then you give that back, and you don't know how those ripples are going to affect people down the road. I love to give to an organization called Mercy Ships. They go to Africa, and there's surgeons on there, and they take kids who at birth had little problems. They should have been taken care of then, but they weren't. They've grown into huge goiters and all kinds of problems, and they're ostracized from their tribes. And these doctors go in there and fix all that, man. And to think that I'm behind that just a little bit just makes me feel so good.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wish I could articulate that one better, because there's something about when you have the ability to let stuff go. And I mean, stuff, meaning money, your time, or your efforts, when you can let that stuff go. And again, I cannot articulate it perfectly.
But it's a lack of selfishness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's what goes, that's the counter to gratitude, is selfishness. You want everything to come to you. You don't want to let anything loose. You want to hold everything tight. But when you let it go, you're free. I
Yeah.
mean, it really is a freedom. And you see that, like I say, sometimes you won't see a ripple for years. I've had people come up to me and go, "Hey, Ron, remember when you did this?" And I was working for Mad Jack back in 1982 doing that stuff. And I'm going, "You still remember that? That's crazy." But you never know what those effects are going to be. And, you're right.
Yeah.
It's part of human growth, and it's part of really expressing yourself in a divine way, I think.
I believe so too. Yeah, it's interesting. Again, a game changer that it's hard to describe, but you did a good job there. And I'm gonna go through a couple really quickly, and then I want you to finish us up because we're getting close on time here. We got about 5 minutes left, but we talked earlier about being careful what goes in our minds.
Mhm.
Guard your mind, guard your heart. I think sleep is really important. Drinking
Very.
water is really important, but I want you to take the last few minutes and just talk about exercising, the value of exercising, physical, whether it be getting outside, rock climbing. I mean, I heard one podcast that was pretty cool. David Goggins told this one guy, they asked him, he said, "Hey, David, I'm very successful. I'm goal driven. I make a great income. Why? What else should I do? I'm in my growth trajectory." And David Goggins, this Navy SEAL who wrote a great book called Can't Hurt Me, he responded with exercise, physical. You got to elevate it. And I was kind of surprised by that. I was like, why? I mean, so, again, you read his book, you understand him, you get an idea. But what do you think about the physical aspects of exercise and how it can contribute to all these things that we've talked about today?
Well, I think one of the most important things it does is relieve stress. And if you can dissipate that, and then while you're exercising, listen to upbeat music, listen to self-development stuff, listen to stuff that you can put in your head along with this effort that you're making. And this physical and mental effort working together will just improve you in all different ways. It will reduce cortisol. Your insulin resistance will go down. Your ability to understand how your body works and what you necessarily need to do to keep it in peak order over a period of time will reveal itself to you. Everybody's not going to be able to run a marathon. Everybody's not going to be able to bench 500 pounds, but you can do some stuff that will work for you, that will allow you to move to the next step, whether it's one little step at a time or not. It will just automatically happen after a period of time.
Yeah. I feel like if I can get the right sleep, which is not always easy, especially if you're traveling, and I can exercise, then I can get through and even thrive in my day. But
Yes.
Ron, we those are awesome, man. And just to summarize, number one, you're 1 to 2 choices away each day. Like you said, 1% better a day is just phenomenal. And the small stuff really matters. Number two, you've got to have healthy relationships, accountability partners. Get a fitness instructor if you need to, a counselor if you need to. Because it's hard when you're on the road to develop and maintain those relationships. Number three, do not underestimate your emotional health and the significance of that. Be intentional about that. Nutrition, we talked about. Number four. Number five, an attitude of gratitude. Number six, being generous and giving away of your time, money, efforts, perhaps, is just a phenomenal way to live. And number seven, exercise is just critical. And all those things, Ron, we think equips us, trains us to win, in our lives, to have a great quality of life, to age, and have the energy. No more of the people going, "I wish I had the energy of that 2-year-old." No, you can have energy. You do these things. And so, again, I think it's just really cool, Ron, and I appreciate your inputs today. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Charlie. But another thing is, if we have these examples that we can set for our children and our grandchildren, then don't just expect them to absorb it by osmosis. Be very intentional about passing this kind of stuff on, because I think that we oftentimes think, well, they're smart, I'm smart, they'll get it. Well, maybe they don't.
Yeah.
And they're overwhelmed too by a whole bunch of stuff, about 90% of which doesn't even need to be in there, but it is.
Right.
That's the world we live in. But thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. And anybody who wants to reach out to us, just give our office a call at Leading Edge Financial Planning, 865-240-2292. We're at leadingedgeplanning.com. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and of course, a podcast. So please share the podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.